This is episode number 78 with award-winning writer Andrew Jones. Hello everyone, I'm Julian Placino, and welcome to the Pathways to Success podcast, where I interview experts on leadership, personal development, business, health and fitness, and many other topics to help you find your unique pathway to success. Having a deep recruiting background, I leverage my ability to attract top performers and conduct in-depth interviews to uncover the secrets to success from a highly diverse group of experts, then share these lessons to help you find your unique pathway to success. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you soon on the Pathways to Success. This episode is brought to you by Focusrite. Focusrite is a global music and audio products group that makes audio interfaces for recording musicians and podcasters in my case. So I personally have been a Focusrite customer since the inception of this podcast. And to this day, I still produce the podcast using the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2. So whenever I invest into any kind of technology, I look for three things. Number one, I look for quality. I want to make sure whatever it is that I invest into creates that desired outcome with great quality. Number two, I look for ease of use. Now, although I am technically a millennial, I'm horrible with technology. So whatever it is that I invest into, I want to make sure it's easy to use. Lastly, because of that previous issue, I want to make sure they have great customer service in case I have any issues and support questions. And having been a Focusrite customer now for over a year, I can absolutely say they check all three boxes. So, for all of you musicians or my fellow podcasters out there, for all of your audio interface and preamp needs, make sure to check out Focusrite at focusrite.com. That's FOCUSRITE.com. What's happening, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pathways to Success. So, as many of you might actually know, I'm in the process of writing my first book, and I have never done this, obviously, and I could use all the help that I can get. And part of the success I've been able to create in life really is seeking out the wise ones, looking for people who have already achieved results that I too would like to achieve and learning directly from them. So Andrew Jones is actually an award-winning writer, and we work together here at the studio, and I had no idea how accomplished he was. And on this episode, we talk about all things creative writing, the creative process, how to induce creative states, how to address writer's block, how to think about writing, lo-fi to hi-fi writing tools, and a lot of Andy's specific writing philosophies. So this is packed with so much amazing information. I walked away with a ton of value, and I know you will too. So make sure to tune in, take notes, and on to the interview. So Andy, I guess first off, give us a little bit of highlights in terms of what you're responsible for here at the studio.
Writing a lot of the marketing material, if not all of it, sales material, sales kits, some PR, just a lot of pickup stuff for all the other marketing needs, but primarily fulfilling all of the new needs of the sales department.
Gotcha.
So sales collateral, stuff like that, all the outward-facing stuff, trying to make the company look and sound more and more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I know we had lunch before we had this conversation. I started to learn more about you. And as you know, I'm so curious about sort of the origin story of people. And I'm curious, when did you first learn and realize that you had kind of an ability to write, to excel with, the written word?
I was an advanced reader, so I was just really into words when I was little. And this was like first grade. I was reading it, some other grade above me. So I was always reading more than the other kids because they were piling the stuff on top of me. And at some point that translated into like wanting to take it beyond just reading. And this kind of speaks more to who I am now, that I don't like to be a spectator for too long. Like I want to engage in the thing that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah.
So I was really into words. And so I wanted to start like creating these stories that I was reading. And this was about the time that like Goosebumps was popular.
Okay.
So, but I felt that they weren't scary enough, so I started writing my own scary stories as a kid, and like wrote them as a series. Like these were books that were going to continue. And I didn't realize this until I was in college, that I was creating like my own universe where these things all lived among it, one another. So I was in elementary school when I started writing stories and fiction and things like that. And just kind of carried that on. I read forever and ever, all through school, and then I got into college and studied poetry and thought I was going to be a poet, and got some stuff published, and then realized I'm never going to make a living off of this unless, I really, really try. and there were just things that I wanted. I wasn't willing to make the sacrifices. I have friends who are poets like full time, and they're making it work. But it just wasn't gonna be the thing for me. But it was also this conflicting thing of I had gotten into music and songwriting at that point too. So my attention switched from writing to songwriting.
Hmm.
And I also think that when I got my first poem published, I thought, oh, good, I did it. That was a goal I set for myself. I accomplished it, and I felt like I didn't need to do it anymore. So I moved on to songwriting. And in that way, it was still sort of a mode of expressing myself. I realized that was what I was actually more passionate about over any of it. These are all just modes of expression. Yeah. So that's kind of what led me here. Yeah.
And do you remember what it was that fascinated you about words? Was it just a vehicle, if a form of expression, or what do you think?
When I was a kid, I think it was the ability for these, like, I mean, this was not the level that I was thinking on, like, as a kid, but I think it was that there were these things on a page, like these marks on a page that we can interpret. They're really just abstract symbols that we interpret, and we form these things in our minds, and it comes from nothing, basically. It comes from things on a page, These little scrawls and scratches on a page become things in our mind, and then they become actionable things that we do in life, and it comes from our minds to a page, back into our minds, and then into the world, and or it comes from the world onto the page, back into the world in a new way, filtered through people. And I thought that was really interesting. Reading fiction as a kid was like, this stuff doesn't exist, and people are putting it into my mind, and I'm seeing my own things. Like when I would talk to my friends about what they thought about this one book or this comic book that they read and their interpretations, I always thought they were wrong because they didn't see what I saw.
Interesting.
But now I see the beauty in that difference of interpretation. I was kind of like a stickler, elitist little kid when it came to fiction and things like that.
Wow. So you were born with kind of a natural curiosity and creativity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. No, that's interesting that you have I didn't start developing a fascination with words until later on, because if I'm being honest with myself, like any type of like ability or talent that I have has always been with communicating. And one of the things I appreciate about words is that you're right, they are symbols for ideas.
Yeah.
And there are deeper meanings to words, like etymology, the study of the origin of words, which is really awesome because like the word humility, for example, like a lot of people associate kind of being meek or weak about it, but humility comes from the word humus, which is a fertile soil, which allows for learning from every situation. So that's why I later on in life have developed like a deep appreciation for words. So
yeah. They're all we have, I think.
Yeah. So how did you get into writing as a profession?
So I was studying poetry, and I went into a master's program after that because that was kind of all I had going on. And they let me teach. I was like, what are you thinking? Having me do this. But I did it, and it seemed like a good fit for me because I was able to, again, express my way of thinking about writing and thinking. And it wasn't like this indoctrination thing where I was, like telling other people what to think, but I was seeing people from my community because I grew up in southern Colorado, which is not as affluent as northern Colorado. Like there's Denver, and then there's everything below it. There's Colorado Springs, which is, further south, but still north. I lived further south than that in Pueblo, Colorado, and that's like a city that gets made fun of a lot and kind of looked down on. And they have their own university there that's part of the Colorado State University system of schools. They don't get nearly as much funding as the other schools. So things are always just kind of problematic there in terms of resources. And their demographic is primarily lower income or first generation or minority students. So I was seeing an incoming class. I taught there for a couple of years, so I saw different people coming in, and they were non-traditional students, or they were, like I said, first generation or lower income. So I saw them struggling with the same things that I and my friends and some of my family did. So I was able to help them, I think, decode college and writing. Writing is especially weird in college because there's a myth. I think writing up until college is taught in a way that when you get to college, it's something different than what you've been taught that it is your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get to college, writing becomes a much more abstract thing. Like the word itself, people don't know what that means when you get into college. Like they think that it's, typing or like physically writing something down, but they don't know what you're writing. And really, I think overall writing is a really abstract term too, because it's like, well, what are you writing and to what end and for whom? And really, it's all of that. So it's writing is a really complex thing. So I felt like this was a good opportunity for me to help people like me decode what that meant.
How do you define writing?
I kind of don't. I break it down into all of these things.
Okay.
But basically, I say it's a mode of expression, which is a very biased thing because that's how I view the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it helps clear away the clutter of like grammar and mechanics. Those things are important, but at a certain stage. I think the beginning of it all is what do you want to express and why and to whom? Because if you just want to, why I think should be inherent in expression.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're kind of just talking to fill air, But then you have to think about to whom, because maybe you're trying to change someone's minds. You're trying to be there's some kind of relativity that you're trying to make there. So you don't want to talk too high or too low and miss your audience, or
Mm-hmm.
kind of alienate yourself from your own audience. But I guess overall, I would say it's expression. But when you want to talk about the overall approach of it, like the steps of it, then it kind of is beyond definition, and it's more about approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are the different kinds of writing, would you say then?
There's, if I were reading this from a book, then you could say there's expository writing, there's
Mhm.
essay writing, there's stuff like that. I think that just confuses things more.
Okay.
There's genres for me. There's fiction, and there's nonfiction, and the way that you write those can change.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you write nonfiction could be different. Technically, what I write for a profession is nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
But you would write that very differently than if you were writing like a nonfiction book, like something like Eat, Pray, Love or something, These are things that happened, but the way that you write them is how they appeal to a certain group of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like self-help books or motivational books are written, I don't know. It depends on how you want to classify those two, because there's there can be a thin line between the two.
Mm-hmm.
But that comes down to who you're speaking to, how you write those things. So, yeah, there are a lot of different genres, I would say, or types, you could say, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how would you sort of define an approach then?
It depends on the genre.
Okay.
Your approach on writing. Well, take what I do, for instance. My approach tends to come preconceived from other people, and then I kind of produce the writing. So that makes my job really easy.
Sure.
The way that I think of it, a lot of my thinking is kind of halfway done by other people.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're coming to a book like from scratch, your approach, I think, needs to come from a lot of self-reflection and interrogation, and just knowing why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay.
And if you have that set, there's always going to be this compass that you're following. Kind of set a contract with yourself, like, this is what I want to say, this is why I want to say it, and this is who I want to say it to. And if you can follow those things, that'll help you keep on track. And then you can start worrying about the little stuff like organization, and maybe you can hire an editor to really care about punctuation and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So as you know, I'm writing a book, and it is a nonfiction book, and it is actually going to fall within the self-help genre, basically documenting how this podcast has changed my life and the results I've been able to create, mainly through recruiting mentors and getting them to help me. So knowing that it is falling within this genre, is there, do you start with an outline? Do you just start writing? How would you start that organization process? Because honestly, I'm just doing what I know, and I'm just banging it out. I created a little bit of a table of contents, but is there a more optimum way to brainstorm, get it on paper, organize, edit? What does all that look like?
Okay, I have a friend right now who is beginning his first fiction book. He's a poet, and he's working on his first fiction book, and so he's starting by journaling a lot and just kind of feeling his own sense of writing, like what his voice looks like in this new way.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of value to that, if it's your first book, or even if it's your second, this is going to be a new topic if this is your second book, right? Or maybe you're writing in a new way if it's your second book. If it's your first book, this is your first time in the form of, like a long form piece of writing, and it's your first time really approaching maybe writing at all.
Yeah.
In a way that's communicating to a large audience.
Totally. That's the boat I'm in. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot. So I think that there's a lot of value in learning yourself. Like, you know how you sound when you're communicating, like on the spot, right? Like when you're inventing thoughts and shooting them out right away. You know how you work there, and you know how you work when you have time to compose thoughts ahead of time. But you might not be too familiar with how you are on the page.
Right.
So I would take time to figure out what that looks like and how you feel there. Journal by hand or typing, whatever works best for you. I have a screenwriter friend who writes everything down. His first draft is always on page, like on pen and page. And then he takes that and he creates a second draft by typing it out and kind of self-editing as he goes. And then he creates a third draft by editing the typed draft, still on a computer. But so that's his process, because he knows really well how he looks on a page, or how his thoughts look on a page. So I would kind of, if this is your first time, get a sense of how you are on the page and how comfortable you are with those expressions that are out there on the page. Like, does that look like me? Does that sound like me?
Yeah.
And then once you feel good about that organization, but I think that that's just for this genre. Like, if you were writing something else, I might have a different way of blocking out your approach and your timeline. But yeah, I think for something like this, organization is really important.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm really starting to realize as I write, because in total I've written about 20,000 words, but of the 20,000, I only feel good about 3,000 of them. So this is like the third complete rewrite of the book. And I find myself actually writing sometimes out of narcissism and not out of value. Like, this is a smart thought, I got to put this down, but it's not connected with what I'm trying to say. And that's why I think coming up with an outline of hardcore reasons why I want to talk about this is important first, and then build out the three supporting points of what I think is important. So that part, I think, is coming natural to me in getting to know myself, of linearly how I like to express my thoughts and how I want to lay them out. But where I struggle the most is the creative process. So what are some things that you have done, or best practices, to sort of induce creative states?
The creative process is going to be different for everybody, but my own can get real weird, I guess.
Let's hear it. I love weird.
Like, it depends on what it is, like what the mode of expression is for me. So if it's writing, well, first of all, people say this a lot, and I think it's true, although I've kind of fallen out of love with books. But
you've fallen out of love with books?
With books, yeah. People tend to say, you're going to be better the more you read, basically. You can't write well unless you read well. I don't know if that's true. I feel like it probably was, like, when I was really, like, much more creative of a writer, I was reading a ton more. And now that I've kind of begun to read less, I'm doing more direct, like, one objective kind of writing, like, writing for marketing kind of stuff. So this is different for everyone, but maybe read some other books and model yourself after people that make an impact on you as you read their words, finding their power and kind of figuring out how they gained that power and how they impose that power over you with just their words. And as I mentioned earlier about songwriting things, I have a ton of producers and songwriters that I admire, and I think that my creativity there is probably the thing I could speak to more, since that's what I'm more active in doing there. And that's creating visual style tiles, they call them here at Bottle Rocket, especially. The designers think in those terms of, this is the vibe you want to set. Like, here's how it's going to look when you design your thing. And I tend to think about other media and then impose those thoughts on the thing I'm working on. So I think about music visually, and I see images and movie posters and things like that, and kind of put all those together, and like, this is the vibe I want to set with the music. I want to evoke these images by making this music. And that's kind of my approach, is looking at other things and hoping that I can evoke similar images or feelings that an image might give you. But that's very kind of artsy fartsy, touchy feely stuff. If you're writing something with more of a focus, like a self-help or like a motivational thing, the creative process, I think some people might take the approach of, and you hear this a lot too, of just doing it every day, even if you're not feeling like it.
Yeah.
And that can help you wade through the crappy writing first and get to the good stuff sooner, and then you learn how you got to the good stuff sooner, and you can kind of follow that trail. So you can write really poorly for 3 days, and then the fourth day you're like, aha, and then you can follow that path to the end of the chapter, and you might make it out of the woods, and you have to start over again with the next chapter. There's no evidence of any of this being true about the more you read, the better you write, or doing it every day helps. I don't know. There might be scientific evidence to the latter one, because that seems like it's more practical. But
of turning it into a discipline.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that doing it every day, even if you don't feel like it, is a definitively good approach. Because maybe some days you need to listen to yourself and say, I'm not feeling like this for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I do to myself. Like, there are some days that I make myself do whatever creative thing I'm doing, even though I'm not feeling like it. But there are some days where I'm like, I definitely do not feel like doing this. There's a reason I feel so strongly about it. I don't know what it is, but I'm just going to listen to my brain and my spirit and my body, and not do it for today.
Yeah, see, I've heard it from both. I've interviewed different authors I've heard authors that are like a Jerry Seinfeld, don't break the chain, write every single day, commit to 500, 1,000 words, whatever that is for you. And then I hear other successful authors that are like, don't force it, don't rush the timeline, let it come to you organically.
Right.
And I'm starting to feel like I'm a little bit kind of in between both. And it's interesting that you said that we use sort of different perspectives to inspire inspiration. To what I've experienced is that because I tried testing that idea of like the better, because I've kind of fallen in love with the books as well for some reason. But as I started writing, it's like, okay, I want to at least mirror match or copy what else is successful out there. But as I stumble onto an idea, it might trigger a thought while I'm already incubating what I'm trying to write, and then it'll give me an idea to add content to my book and spin it in my direction. So that seems to be working for me.
Yeah.
So as far as along the vein of continuing to induce kind of a creative state, what important is like the environment? Like some people talk about, go outside in nature or find an office or whatever. Like, has any of that worked for you when it comes to writing specifically?
It has.
Yeah.
But at this point, I think that I'm in tune with my own approach, that I can kind of do it. Not everywhere. I like to work in more quiet environments.
Yeah, I can't listen to music. I
Yeah,
can't. Like,
right.
it has to be like deafeningly quiet.
Yeah.
Because I will speak, because I know where I'm much more of a speaker right now than I am as a writer. And sometimes whenever I write the way that I speak, but on paper it looks ridiculous. It's so technical. It's the words are not friendly, but that's the way I communicate. And I'm trying to sort of change that and find kind of that balance. And I guess that's part of that whole learning how you look on the page. I've never heard someone say it like that before, but that is what I'm experiencing.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So, okay, so inducing the creative state, so that not necessarily has been a factor for you. You've gotten to the point where...
Yeah, and sometimes I have to put myself there, though. Like, if I'm trying to write something with a certain mood, I'll try and surround myself with those things. And that, again, is like taking other forms of media into my process. Where like, okay, I want to write something kind of dark, so I'm going to watch a bunch of Mario Bava films for the week. And I've realized that for me, that works best when I take things outside of what I'm working on and make it work in that medium. So like, I don't work in film, but I love to watch movies to make me work in what I'm doing. Especially in terms of like plotting and things like that. Like if I'm doing something more creative and plot driven, then I study those forms and make it work in the thing that I'm wanting to do. Especially like in music, since I could speak more immediately to that, because that's the thing I've been focusing on more. But the same was true for poetry. Music really informed poetry, not poetry, right? Like I read a lot of poetry and I had people that I admired, but when I wanted to write poems, I would listen to songs. And when I want to write songs, I pay attention to movies.
Interesting.
So that's kind of how I work. I take other forms and see how they work in
a different context. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So, maybe something like, like with what you're working on, maybe that would work. I don't know. Because I've never tried that. Like I've never written what you're writing. Or maybe there's some other form. Maybe if you listen to Radio Lab a lot, like that NPR show that is very mixed media, maybe that would work because of the way that they tell stories in such a different way. Yeah, I don't know.
So when you do experience writer's block, what is your methodology to get out of it?
Writer's block to me, and some people believe that writer's block is like there's something jamming you up, and other people don't believe that it's true. But for me, writer's block is I've lost the commitment, or I don't care anymore.
Interesting. Do you think it's a symptom of something?
Yeah, and or I've lost the vision. It's not that like, oh, the ideas won't come anymore. Okay, so David Lynch said this about ideas, and I think that it's super true, and it sort of unlocked the whole writer's block thing for me. Not to say that I don't get it anymore, but I know where it's coming from now for me personally, because David Lynch was talking about creativity is like fishing. But I'm gonna forget like how he connected the metaphor to the whole process. But he was saying, like if you go out into the world and you're like, I want to be creative and I want to write, and you sit down at the page and you're just gonna start writing, like you're just tapping from your own mind, and it's not really. You're eventually going to run out of whatever juice you were pulling from, right?
Right.
But if you're looking out and you're open to the world and you're hearing ideas, something is gonna capture your mind, and like a fragment of someone's phone conversation as they walked by you on the street will make you wonder, like, I wonder what the story behind that was. And then you're going to start, and then you're going to start thinking about where that conversation went or where it came from. And then that's going to become your story or your television show or, whatever it is that you're going to write.
Yeah.
So being more open to the world and kind of casting your line out and capturing the fish or capturing whatever idea that you've heard out there. That can be your creativity, is hearing the world and then letting it kind of cipher through.
So actually stepping away from the
going
writing?
out. Yeah, leaving it and hearing people, seeing things, listening to things.
Yeah.
Food, I mean, like all of these things that your body is capable. And this is where I think that I kind of get a little weirder than most, because some people are just like, oh, read a book, read someone that's really good, read, these canon authors like Hemingway or whatever. And to me, it's like, I need to experience something different. I'm staring at words, I'm thinking in terms of words, I need to go like eat, or I need to like taste something or hear something, like engage my senses in some other way, but still keep my mind open in that Lynchian way where I'm, my lines are out, my nets are out, and I'm waiting for something interesting to come along, and then I'll catch that. And so it's important to know that you're not ripping off other people's ideas. You're not trying to steal or like remix someone. You're seeing like a color, and that color's gonna stew in your mind, and then one day in the shower you're gonna be like, oh, that's it. And maybe the inspiration came from the color, or from the food that you ate, or the drink you had, or the conversation you had with a stranger, or something like that. To me, that's creativity.
Yeah.
And that's the creative process, is that it's always happening. It's just your frame of mind. It's your perception of the world. It's not necessarily the thing you do when you sit down, because then it becomes like a production, like a mode of production and not of expression at that point.
Yeah. See, I haven't been able to articulate it that way, because sometimes I feel so disciplined about achieving my goals. It's like, I got to crank this out like brute force, but that's when I become the most empty. Like, have you read that book, Advertising Secrets of the Written Word?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's like a staple for like a lot of marketers and
Mm-hmm.
copywriters, right? But the one thing I remembered about it is the importance of incubation,
Yeah.
of like to actually step outside, and that's how it describes the subconscious mind starts putting together connections that are seemingly unconnected, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of the creativity comes into place. But yeah, I guess that's a good takeaway that I should have. If I really feel jammed up, go do something kind of unrelated,
Yeah.
and that has worked for me. So I use this term very lightly, but have you had any kind of success with smart drugs? And what I mean by is like, like caffeine, or there's a product called Alpha Brain out there. Like, have you done anything like that before? Or
Yeah, and maybe it's just my own body, but I react really negatively to it,
really?
and it's not like I do it for moral reasons or anything like
Hmm.
that, but I guess like I could honestly say that I'm caffeine free, but
Really?
it's not like a way of life for me. It just worked out that way.
Yeah.
I used to drink a ton of like Mountain Dew and soda and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it. Like this is why it's difficult for me to articulate it because it sounds like I'm being judgy because I don't do it. You
Hmm.
know,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
oh well I don't drink coffee. Like it's not a judgment on you that I don't, right? But I don't drink coffee or soda or anything like that. Um, I just yeah, that's just kind of it. And part of it was that my body began reacting negatively to it after consuming it for so long.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I like swam in this stuff. Um, and one time I took a 5 hour energy to make a long drive and just felt like a zombie. And it was like the most unpleasant experience I've ever had.
Hmm.
So I was like, I'm going to chill with the caffeine for a little bit and everything's fine. But none of it ever like helped me be creative or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, I had friends who did like real drugs and they made some of the worst stuff on and off the drugs. They
Yeah.
made worse stuff on the drugs than they did
Hmm.
off. And I think because people are looking for the tool, I think that comes from people. I mean, doing like real drugs, right? I think that comes from people not wanting to live the always on lifestyle
Hmm.
of it, and it's very inward too, not like an always on like a performative thing, but like always on in terms of like that little switch in your brain being on of like hearing things and perceiving the world in a certain way.
Hmm.
I think people just weren't keen to that, and you don't have to be that. Like it's fine if you're not, but if you are like that, it can be exhausting because you're always was that something? Am I gonna chase that idea down? Oh, that was cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot it, and then you beat yourself up for forgetting it. Um, but like smart drugs and stuff like that, like maybe they work for some people, but I
Hmm.
would recommend to those people to try to get more sleep because that really
That's helped
that
you.
changed my life, getting real
Off of
sleep.
caffeine. And how
Yeah,
long have you been off of?
for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like a long time.
So you can feel a definitive difference not being on caffeine, like in terms of your natural energy
Uh
levels.
huh. Yeah.
Man, see, I think I need to detox a little bit off of caffeine.
Yeah.
Do you remember how long your withdrawal was for getting off that stuff?
I think I did it really gradually,
Okay.
because it was with soda first.
Soda. Okay.
And then I drank like it wasn't a monster, but it was like a monster basically.
Hmm.
And then I did the 5 hour energy thing once. And that was like, oh my God. I was driving, it was such a, okay, like this is how I felt. Like when I drank whatever thing I drank that it was monster like,
Hmm.
I think it was like the Sobe version of monsters. I had that and like I was having like palpitations because
Oh.
I was exhausted. Like I should have just been sleeping,
Yeah.
and I drank it, and my body was like, "What the hell are you doing? I can't handle this." And the next time I was driving back from California to Colorado, and I was driving through a desert, and took the 5 hour energy like dose that you're supposed to take,
Mhm.
like just like a quarter of the thing, and I was listening to. I don't like Miles Davis, so I don't know why I was listening to him, but I was listening to Sketches of Spain, driving through the desert, and my body was asleep. Like my mind was asleep, but my eyes were open, and I was like,
Wow.
I can't process the world around me. Like what I needed to do was like find a hotel and just sleep. It was such a zombie-like experience. Like I couldn't. I mean, I could make some decisions. I was able to operate a vehicle to
Mhm.
some extent, but I couldn't understand what was happening around me. It was
That's
so
crazy.
weird. Yeah. So
Wow.
I was like, I can't mess with this anymore. I just have to go to bed.
Gotcha.
And
So sleep.
I'm a much more boring person now because I can't stay out that late, but I feel better.
Yeah. Wow. Any kind of rituals that you do to start the creative process or before you start writing?
I think that that's always, person to person, that's always going to be different, obviously. For me, if it's writing, I like to kind of, get the right notebook. I love having like a good notebook with
So
that's
you really
blank.
you write like
I prefer to do that. I mean,
pen.
like in my job, like in my professional life,
Yeah.
time is of the essence, so I have to have a computer in front of me, and
Sure.
I don't have a ton of time to incubate, But when I'm writing for myself and for a creative endeavor, I like to write like
With your hand.
yeah, in a notebook with the right pen.
What is it that you get from that experience versus typing it up on a computer?
There's a more of a sense of like putting it into the world, like you're really creating
Interesting.
in that way.
Yeah.
Um, and some people kind of just romanticize it just
Mm-hmm.
because that's the way that it used to, like you had to have done that before computers. And but for me, like I'm manifesting something in that way.
There's more of a physicality to it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're
Interesting.
kind of like making, it's like you're like blacksmithing, like you have
Mm-hmm.
to use your limbs and stuff, like
It's a craft now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
using my arm.
Interesting. Interesting. So what else? What else? What are some of the other kind of habits and stuff that you've developed to support your writing?
When I'm writing,
But no like ritual, no breathing exercise, no physical exercise, nothing
right.
like that.
No, but I started doing yoga in the last year.
You have.
Yeah, and that's kind of opened up some
Really?
things. Yeah.
What have you? What are the benefits you have experienced?
Like, well, when I first started, it was really difficult to pause my mind.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's a meditative thing. It's
Mhm.
just, it's this thing, like I'm doing the Baptiste flow kind of yoga stuff.
Mhm.
So it's just, you have to focus on your body and let go of the struggle because it can be difficult. And
Yeah.
you have to let go of that and just be in the moment. Don't be thinking about what happened before you got there or the pose you just got out of that you didn't do that well. Don't be thinking about where you're going next or what you're going to eat after it's over. Just be in the moment and be in your body. And that's something that I never, ever, ever do. And when I'm in yoga, that's my hour to do that. Like I have a difficult time doing it outside of yoga, although I'm
Mhm.
trying to do that. But it's kind of hard to do that when you're, working every day and like living in America. You're
Mhm.
just working and
Go
making
go
money and
go.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's it's difficult to just be in the moment because then you're going to be behind.
Mhm.
So in that hour of yoga, I get to just be in a moment, and it kind of clears some pathways creatively for me because I'm not. I mean, my phone is a huge distraction, but I'm totally tied to it because it's such a source of information for me.
Mhm.
So I get to be in the moment and not be like, I don't care about what someone tweeted 5 minutes ago or 1 minute ago. That's in the past. I want to be in the moment right now. And I won't care about what's going to happen in the future because I'm so focused on creating this moment in time,
Mhm.
whether it be like a music recording or something that I'm writing down. I'm interested in capturing a moment at that time.
Mhm.
And that can't be in the past or the future. That has to be like right now with me being present. So
Hmm.
yoga has helped for sure. But
Cool.
yeah, that may not be for everybody. Obviously, some people
Yeah.
may not be able to like physically do it, and that's totally cool. There are other ways that I'm sure meditation would help some people.
Mhm.
Um,
Have you experienced anything with meditation?
not too deeply. I got into it in a little bit for when I was in grad school,
Mhm.
but it wasn't something that I followed too intensely because I just didn't have the time.
Yeah.
Which is a really bullshit excuse, but um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So on the flip side, going a little bit more high fidelity in the sense that has there been any kind of technology or tools that you've used that has helped you as a writer?
Knowing how to use Word more, like the intricacies of Word, has helped me a ton in my day job, like my day to day. You're facing deadlines and things like that. Like getting things back to people for review has been
Mhm.
incredibly helpful, and being able to edit copy has been really helpful. And but in terms of like a creative endeavor, like more like straight up pure creative stuff,
Mhm.
um, it to me it can be so analog of just paper to pen, and then I start writing it
Mhm.
that there isn't too much tech getting in the way. My phone though, my notes are filled up because now I can't even imagine how many ideas I've forgotten before I had my phone.
Mhm.
Like, and this is something that's pretty consistent. Like people use the voice notes or just the notes apps on their phones. Like I live and die by those. They're always open, and every time I open my phone, there's a note. And I feel kind of embarrassed because sometimes my wife will pick up my phone to look something up, and she'll see this note pop up, and it's, no context. It's just like some words and an idea, and I probably look like super weird or whatever.
Yeah.
So it can be kind of a private thing that I don't want, like, just like, anyone, but even my own wife to see, because there's no context to this idea. But that is so helpful to be able to record something that I've seen or a thought that I had, and then I'll pursue it later. But there's some deadliness to that, in that you've written the idea down and that was the whole point. So what are you going to do with it now? Like, sometimes you have to really pursue the idea immediately and get it all out. And there's I think I mentioned Eat, Pray, Love earlier. I didn't mean to do that, because there's a book by that same author called Big Magic, I think, that I read the first half of. The last half I didn't feel was really relevant to me, but the first half is really, really good, and I recommend that to you and to anyone else that wants to read about the creative process, because I met some really creative people who hate talking about the creative process because they think it's like boring, or they don't want to feel pressed on talking about their own, or they don't want to explore it so much that they've dissected it. But this is a really interesting book that in the beginning she talks about a lot of different people's approaches to creativity. And one of them was, this woman felt, she was a writer, she felt a physical rush of an idea coming at her. And she describes writing a poem as she was looking out over a lake, I think, and she felt that she could sense it coming at her. And she ran into her house and she started writing, and I'm totally like ripping off the book by telling you the story. But she ran into her house and started writing the idea down, and she felt that she had plucked it out of the air by the tail. She said she wrote the poem backwards, because that's how she was pursuing it, that she had it from the tail and was pulling it back toward her, and she wrote the poem backwards. So some people pursue creativity in very, very different ways, and they perceive it, the whole process in different ways. So
in this book I will learn different approaches to see what might work for me, because I'm big into that. Okay, cool. And it's called Eat, Pray, Love.
It's called Big Magic.
Big Magic. Okay.
From the author of
from the author
Eat, Pray, Love.
Got it. Okay, Big Magic. I gotta write that down.
So sometimes there's technology involved in people's creative processes, and sometimes there's not, and sometimes their approach is very ritualistic, and sometimes it's just like, oh my god, I have an idea and I need to pursue it right now. There's a really good songwriter named Dan Wilson who talks about doing it right now. Just make it happen, and if it's crap, you have time to edit it, but at least you got the idea down. And he wrote or co-wrote that Adele song, Someone Like You, so he's pretty legit.
But there hasn't been any technology. It sounds like you use technology to capture ideas, but there hasn't been any kind of technology to help you create ideas.
Not compositionally in terms of writing. Music, I heavily rely on technology, but with writing, it's still the way I think of it is just so much of like, this is a mode of expression for me, and the expression is just another form of word delivery, that it's just me writing it down, and then the technology for me comes in how I deliver it to people after it's done.
Got it.
Like, okay, now I have to actually distribute this to people. There, it's pretty much all technology anymore.
Gotcha. Yeah. So anything else that might help me or our listeners become better writers, facilitate the creative process? I mean, anything else?
I want to become more of an evangelist for people caring less about mechanics and grammar. It really doesn't matter. And this is like my academic side speaking. Like, I taught ESL to Japanese students. I taught composition and literature. I read the research. I conducted the research. My wife is a PhD, and she's still very active in academia. She's an assistant professor, so I still am surrounded by these people and by these ideas, and I read her work and I talk to her peers and colleagues about this. it doesn't matter. The rules are so arbitrary to begin with, and we have the rules like for grammar and punctuation for some reasons, right? Like, and what they come down to is for readability and understandability.
Right.
So if I'm speaking to you in this order, this is the order that we learned our language in, like, or, you know, I'm talking about like word order and syntax and things like that. You understand what I'm saying because we're speaking on a common vernacular. If it's written in that same way, we're going to know what it's saying. But sometimes you can take liberties and you can say interesting things and switch it up and down. You could read Cormac McCarthy and it could be really weird and interesting because he doesn't use commas that much or even a whole lot of punctuation, but it helps with setting the flow of his narrative. Your editor that you might have will not agree with you all the time, but don't care. You know, when you're getting it down, don't care. Just get the idea down, and then you can edit it to sound how you want it to sound, you know, to make it sound like you on the page. But just get your ideas down first. And then as you're editing, don't care that much still. What you need to care about is readability. Does this help people read the page? Because what matters the most of the whole thing is your expression reaching the people you want to reach in the mode that you want to reach them through. So if it's on a page, you're expressing yourself, you want it to get to the right people, right? Like you want to express yourself fully and accurately and precisely. And I think that that's where the real surgical nature of it comes in, is in choosing the right words, not the right punctuation. Like, oh, well, AP style says,
Yeah.
doesn't matter what AP or what MLA or what Chicago says, just do your thing. And it's tough because like I know a ton of editors and I feel like I'm like just shitting on what they do. But I mean, I still edit, and I was an editor coming up. Like I know all that, and it's people's bread and butter. But at the end of the day, where it matters is very important. But as the producer of what you're doing, as the creator and the owner of your expression and of your ideas, that's not your job. And if you want to make it a priority in your own writing, then you can hire someone to make that a priority in your writing. And if you don't have the means to hire someone, then you can certainly learn those things and impose them on yourself, but you're going to make yourself very miserable doing it. That's not to say that editors are miserable people, because I am also an editor, but it's difficult for me to care all the time about like, well, should we use an M dash or a semicolon? Who cares? Because I understood what it said, right? Fluency in spoken language is very broken English.
Right. Yeah.
You just have to understand what they're saying. And if you understand what a person is saying, and if they're not a native language speaker of your language, right? Like non-native English speakers, if you understand what they're saying, they're fluent. And if they're not speaking perfectly, precise, American English or British English, doesn't matter. You understood them. They're fluent, and that's all that it comes down to. And if it offends your sensitivities that they don't use articles like, the or a or an or whatever, that's tough. That's on you for caring. But what matters is that two people communicated and they understood each other, and that was the whole point. So it becomes a little more complicated when it's in writing or in a book, because then you have to overcome, like what I was saying earlier. This is very circular. It ends up becoming a much more difficult task, because you're taking your mind, putting it on a paper with lines and squiggles, and then people have to reinterpret that. There are all these stages of understanding another person through writing. And if you're following the rules too closely, you can gunk up your own thinking.
I think that's the big thing that's helping me, Andy, is because this is the first time I'm doing it. I have no baseline of comparison, so I'm constantly second guessing myself, like I'm doing this wrong, and there's like, you know what I mean? So what I'm getting from this is that it is an individual piece of expression, and as long as I don't get lost in the mechanics of writing, and as long as I'm really just saying what's in my heart and what I know to be true, that's okay. Because I think also what you mentioned is that I can hire an editor and they can kind of deal with that part. I need to make sure that I'm communicating what I know to be true and what's important to the reader, and kind of don't forget about, because that's what blocks me up also, man. I'm like, what's the best way to say this? This doesn't look like how I've seen something written before.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like the best writing that I've done is like when I'm speaking very plainly without using big words, without trying to sound eloquent, when it's just very direct and clear, when I'm using a lot less words to explain something more elegantly, you know what I mean?
Yeah. One of my the guy who chaired my thesis, he was always into understatement, and that kind of like cut down a lot of my writing. He was like, this would be better if it were understated.
Yeah.
He said that a lot, and I always had to ask him what he meant by it, because it varied from statement to statement what he meant by that. But for me, the way that I think, I was always having to explain my thoughts deeper and deeper. Like I want people to understand what I'm saying so much, like so perfectly.
Yeah.
Like I'm so obsessed with the idea of like a perfect mode of communication through writing.
Yeah.
That I would take like paragraphs to explain one thought.
Yeah.
And he was like, just say the sentence and then move on. And I was like, but I want people to understand. Like I want footnotes. I want all of these paragraphs to explain exactly what I'm saying. And he was like, well, people understood the sentence, so you've lost them by the third sentence of you explaining your first thought. You know? Just say it, move on, and if they're captured by the idea, and if the idea is compelling enough, they'll stop reading and they'll think about it. And I was like, whoa, that's how I read. Like when there's an idea, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, when I read a sentence, sometimes I close the book and I'm like, I'm done for the day because I need to think about that idea for the rest of the night. And maybe not every sentence is going to be that compelling, but you've expressed that idea and you can move on.
Yeah. I can show you all my previous drafts of what you just described is true for me. It's like I want to explain one idea using every single adjective. You know what I mean? It's like it's excess, it's waste. And it's not a lean form of writing in my view. So, well, Andy, this has been incredibly helpful, man. So knowing what you have discovered about me now, where I am in the writing process and what I'm trying to achieve, if there was just one piece of advice, because I'm taking vacation next week and I want to get as much headway as possible, what's that one piece of advice that you could give me going into next week?
Be you, just to the most authentic extent that you can be you.
Yeah.
And that is fucking up, that's writing poorly, or that's making mistakes, that's like just composing like stream of consciousness and writing and missing words and stuff, and just getting the ideas down, but very honestly. Yeah. And you can take that as whatever you want it to mean for you, but to me, when I think about that, because that's how I approach a lot of stuff, it's just I gotta be me really honestly, and sometimes that means saying an unpopular thing or an unpleasant thing, or it means saying it in this one way and not in the other, because the idea came from someone else, but I like saying it this way, and that's the way that I'm going to say it. Just be you and write it down, because the reason that we like other people's ideas is because they were the ones that expressed them in that unique way, and now it's your turn to put out your unique Julian ideas. And there are going to be people who are very receptive to it. Yeah. But it's scary territory because it's never been done. You're the first person to do it. And that's weird because there's no guideline for how to be Julian. You just got to be you. And just be unafraid to be you. I mean, there's going to be fear, but the fear is what should drive you, I think. Yeah. Love it. Andy, this has been incredibly helpful, man. I appreciate this. I appreciate the conversation. I have tons of actionable items, man. And again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Of course. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. This is great. So there you have it, everyone. My in-depth interview with Andrew Jones. You can actually also connect directly with Andrew at his personal website at hearandrewjones.com. I'll make sure to leave these links directly in the show notes, which you can visit at julianplacino.com. So this is actually going to be one of the final episodes that I record only through audio. So I'm moving the podcast to video. So all new recordings of the Pathways to Success will be moving to video. And I'm looking to grow my YouTube channel and to access and serve a new audience there. So make sure to head out to YouTube as well. Just type in my name, Julian Placino. It will be the first channel that pops up. So thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the Pathways to Success, and I look forward to connecting with you next week.